everyone, and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I'm your host, Mookie Spitz, and I am the bald one, and the one with effervescing ambition this afternoon is Mr. Vince Parry. He is the president and founder of Parry Branding Group, and as the eponymous name implies, he is the expert in branding. For several decades, he has branded companies, large and small, across verticals from healthcare to others. He has branded products and services, and now he is taking a special focus on personal branding. We're going to talk all things branding with a focus on personal branding. Welcome aboard, Vince.
Hey Mookie, how's it going? I really appreciate being on. And most of all, I'm going to love talking to one of my favorite personal brands, you.
Thanks. That'll do much not only for the conversation, but hopefully in terms of you letting me refine it a little bit. And any advice that you can give me, I am all ears.
Well, right now, I'm letting you be you.
All right. And with that spirit of me being me, I'm gonna take it from the top, which is we live in crazy, chaotic, tumultuous times. And from what I can see, we are placing personality over policy. We are looking at the characters and figures who are dominating our news and business cycles. And we seem to be making key decisions about our country, our lives, based upon what I think are powerful personal brand expressions. Can you talk a little bit about what constitutes a personal brand, how a personal brand is different or the same from, let's say, a company's brand? And can you set it up in a way where listeners who are interested in forging or refining their own personal brand can learn some things and take some things away from this conversation?
Yeah, great question. I think the biggest obstacle for people to engage and, like you said, forge a personal brand is that I think a lot of people think it's like you're going to make a logo for me, you're going to design a business card for me. That's not what I'm talking about. Although the strategies we develop in my exercises with clients certainly will provide a strategic direction to do that. Really, a personal brand is the same process as branding services and products and franchises and anything else, really. The process is the same, but the exercises and the goals are really a little different. Basically, a personal brand is going through the things you want to be, all right? Forming an image and a strategy around how you want others to see you. Again, it's really aspirational, and that is not only a series of personality traits like yours, vibrant, uplifting, insightful, but also in terms of talking points, messages that you want to get into conversation that helps establish a self that will help you get jobs, will help you move up the ladder, will help you start your own business. So it's not visual at this point, it's really, really personal and strategic.
So, how does that overlap with some of the attributes of what a person or a company does? So, what is the difference between a brand identity, whether it's a company, a product, a service, or an individual, and the things they actually do to provide benefit?
Yeah, again, that's critical. You could do all the strategizing and paperwork you want, but just like product brands or websites that engage users, it's the brand experience. You've got to walk the walk. You've got to do things and say things that reflect the strategic brand that you create on paper. So, for example, let's say, you know, you're pigeonholed in a job, right? You were hired 2 years ago, and everybody still thinks you're the person you were 2 years ago. Well, obviously your brand is not engaging them, is not convincing them that you have greater value, different kinds of talents, and skills. And they're not going to see it unless you create a brand for yourself that walks the walk of the strategy you want to develop. So if you're pigeonholed, you got to get out of that. Now, you can either go to another job, or you can demonstrate to your current employee or current employers that indeed, hey, I'm a lot different than you think I am. Now, either way, if you do that at your current job or use it to get a new job, that's one example of how a personal brand can help guide you and deliver a best self that will engage people in a way you want to move up the ladder.
So it sounds like whether we like it or not, whether we accept it or not, or even know about it or not, we already have a personal brand. So, as you mentioned in your example, if people know you a certain way and you're looking to transform your job, change it up, people have certain things that they associate with you as your brand personality. And again, I'm trying to understand and get you right. The service that you provide, the strategy that you would provide, for example, for an individual like this, is to take that brand personality that they currently have and transform it. Because one way or another, we all have opinions about our colleagues. We have opinions about what we purchase in the store. We have opinions about the news that we ingest every day. What you're offering is a way to refine it, optimize it, and put it to the task of ultimately realizing your professional goals. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. This is the one thing that I often tell people who say, well, I don't really need it. Um, and then, of course, you question, well, are you in a place where you're happy to be? Well, I'm not going on dates. You know, I've been in the same position at my job for 4 years now. And then you realize, you know what? You don't think you need it, but you're telling yourself right now you do. And the thing I say to them is, if you don't cultivate your personal brand, others will do it for you. And believe me, you will not like the results. So taking charge of it is not such a luxury as much as a necessity if you want to greatly influence achieving your goals and changing directions. Now, you said transformation. I think it is a transformation, just so people don't think that they've got to behave, 180 degrees from when they're doing now. It has to be a reflection of some aspects of what they do, who they are. So maybe you take a look. One of the analyses that I do is we explore, are there traits that are part of your aspirational brand? Let's not get rid of them, but let's swap out, change, improve, create nuances that, may transform you or may just make you seem like a person who is doubling down on what's already working. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but uh,
Absolutely. So it's analysis. You take a look at an individual's strengths and weaknesses. You take a look at an individual's attributes and qualities, analogous to how you might create a brand architecture for a product or a service or a company. And then once you whittle that down, you could be selective. You can prioritize certain attributes which seem to be benefiting that individual. And then after you've deconstructed them, you reconstruct them in a way that could be creative or provocative or in any way that differentiates that individual within a crowded landscape to really get attention, sustain attention, and convey, to your point, those key attributes that come naturally, you're not asking anyone to be anything other than themselves,
Right,
but to
right.
but to do so in a manner that enables them to accomplish their goals, whether it's getting the other job, whether it's shifting careers, or whatever the task is at hand. Is that right? Am I reading that right?
No, 100% right. Um, to build on that, I always say, you know, when you're building a brand, you don't start with the product or the person. You start with who do you want to engage? All right. What type of individual or groups of people, all right, do you want to have a positive opinion about you? Now, obviously that's a pretty broad target, but the idea here is to give you a personality um, that people will see a reflection of their own values in you. Okay, you go on a date, you're not connecting, all right, but if you were reflecting the kind of person that this other person is looking for, and you're staying true to yourself, it's going to be a lot more engaging and a lot more genuine, but on a on a more sort of advanced aspect of yourself. Now, um, one other thing about that is your brand personality, okay, is not just one thing. That would be a boring personality. It usually is comprised of about 3 to 5 different aspects that you want to portray in engagements. Now, you don't use them all at once. So for example, let's say, hey, I want to be honest, I want to be seen as smart, I want to be seen as thoughtful. I want to be seen as innovative. Well, there are going to be times when you really, really click up on that, index high on that innovative side of you. And there are going to be other times where you index on the honest side of you. It allows you to mix and match things that still stay true, but accommodate different situations you find yourself in.
Do you tie these back to what would be considered archetypal personality traits that people immediately can relate to? Because I know in marketing and positioning, to get the mind share that's out there, there's the tacit assumption that your audience, your targets, the people that you're alluding to in terms of your focus of bringing about that attention and change, they have limited bandwidth and they have prior prejudices and biases and associations with certain emotional triggers. So it's not about starting from scratch,
Right.
but relating that brand personality or that personal brand to a person or character that folks already know and understand and appreciate, and in a sense lining it up in a way that becomes immediately obvious. Is that an approach? Is that a technique that you use?
You started out with archetyping. Um, is that what you're talking about? And if so, how do you define archetyping?
Well, it's just the lexicon, and I'm trying to explore your technique for going about doing the great stuff that you do. But what I'm alluding to is, for an example, Elon Musk has been equated with the Tony Stark of our age.
Uh-huh.
So, regardless of how you feel about him, regardless of your politics, he is front and center in our news, in our politics, in our culture, and in our technology. So, when I say Elon Musk is like Tony Stark,
Mm-hmm.
that's all you need to do,
Mm-hmm.
because when you know who Tony Stark is
Mm-hmm.
and the attributes that we assign to Tony Stark, we immediately assign to Elon Musk, and it's almost like your job is done. We
Mm-hmm.
know who this guy is, we know why he does what he does, and then we'll expect some of the bad with the good, because why? He's Tony Stark.
Yeah. That's a great example. So I know that some practitioners of branding, they use archetypes that are, preset. you're a Sherpa, you are a wizard, you are a astronaut or whatever. Um, and I think it's important to use that device, that tool, but instead of picking, a preset archetype, we do it in the reverse, and we ask. One of the exercises we do is ask a lot of questions about, if your personal brand, okay, is an article of clothing, what kind of article would it be? you know and people will generate a number of personality traits out of that. I'm not interested in this, if it's a sweater or not. And if going through all of the exercises, and there's a lot of visualization and a lot of metaphor, analogy, um, and stuff like that, basically you might come out with an equivalent like you're pointing out, which would be a Tony Stark. Now I would argue that you know uh, Tony Stark has similar attributes to Musk, or vice versa actually, but there are differences, there are nuances, and I don't want people to think that, and I don't think you're saying this either. I don't want people to think, you fit into slot B13. You're original and different, but if you want to focus on a sort of a touchstone, a lighthouse, that may be a good way, to remind yourself, if I'm like Tony Stark, what would I do in this situation? How do I, as a personality, behave if I threw a party? What kind of party would it be? And again, you can get a foundation that's associated with the archetype, but I think there are going to be individualized expressions of that because, as Tony Stark is Tony Stark, and Elon Musk is Elon Musk, and both very, very good brands, or at least Musk was doing a good job up until recent activities, in my opinion. But yeah, archetypes can really help focus someone, like the title of a book or so. But I don't want to, use it exclusively, to you're a carbon copy of that, so to speak. And I don't think that's what you're thinking either.
Yeah, thanks for the clarity. So, in summary, it starts not with the person that you're creating the personal brand for, but their goals and objectives for their personal brand, and an analysis of their target audience.
Hmm.
So, as you mentioned, what's your goal? Well, I want to change my career, or I want people to like me, or I need to do X, Y, Z. All right.
Hmm.
And then the next step is, well, who do you want to believe that about you? That's
Right.
step two. And then what you're saying here is step three. Let's find interesting and poetic means to dig into what you do and how you do it and why you do it in a way that's unique to you, that isn't necessarily, it could be like a character. You could be Peter Pan or
Right.
Tony Stark or whomever, but we're going to try to understand what attributes you have that we could better understand and tweak so we can move the minds of the audience you want to influence to accomplish the goals that you have set out to attain. Is that more or less the approach?
I'm going to hire you to write my public relations because you really nailed it.
All
um,
right, great, great. Well, that's why conversations like this are a lot of fun and illuminating. So we got step one, two, three, and then hit us with your number four. So we know what we want to do, we know who we want to do it for, and we know how we're going to go and do it. So after you've got these attributes, how do you reconstruct that persona, if you will, to have the best impact?
if I understand you correctly, um, the devising the personal brand is a strategic thing. Once you get a strategy down, once you get, I want to be seen as someone. Right now I'm seen as someone who is working, at a level where, they're fulfilling someone else's vision. So at a job you may be, a worker bee. I don't want to be a worker bee. I want to be, the visionary guy, So you want to construct that strategy to appeal to people who are looking at you to say, I never realized that this person, has a lot of visionary thinking. Let me reconsider how much value he would add to the organization. So, with that in mind, you have to create tactics. Okay. And what I mean by tactics are anything from how does my brand dress? How does my brand support different causes or music or anything like that? How does my brand um, come across in conversation? Uh, how does my brand influence the way that I do anything? Write a resume. So those are tactics. That's how you deploy a brand. And so, therefore, you actually have to write what I consider to be a message platform. Now, uh, that sounds weird and complicated or whatever. Other people would call it talking points, but that sounds too rigid. So, for example, the rigidity of a political situation, a Republican might, say, I want to be seen as someone who espouses traditional values, uh, is efficient and economic and frugal, and really reinforces the idea that my country, my neighbor, is really where I focus rather than, outside of the country on other situations or other things. Now, you need talking points. What do I say? How do I convince people that that's true? That's a very rigid thing because you have to tell people boom, 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 these are my ideas, and you repeat it again and again and again. That's not quite the way people behave, in the real world, so to speak. So you come up with ideas and concepts about how you might want to talk about different situations in a way that reinforces your personal brand. Believe it or not, it's not sort of uncomfortable or didactic, but what it does over time is you get into the habit of understanding what side of your personality do you want to have talking at a certain point, and what's your general attitudes about it so that you can fulfill your brand in other people's eyes. The other thing would be what you do. What hobbies do you have? What bands do you like? What, where would you go when you went on vacation? And that's the kind of thing where it reinforces the strategy. Now, that's why the strategy has to be real to you. It can't be an artificial person. It's just, a guide that allows you to be more nuanced and more purposeful about the things you say and the things you do and the friends you make and the hobbies you have and everything that makes you you in a way that appeals to the target audience you are seeking to partner with.
So what I'm hearing is that after this personal brand has been created, it's a strategy. It's, in a sense, a concept as to who you are, incorporating what you've learned through this exercise. But where the rubber hits the road is where you apply that strategy through tactical recommendations that have real impact with real touch points across your social network, within the business community, and out there in the market. And these tactics could be anything from how you walk, how you talk, how you dress, to where you go, what you do, and ultimately how you impact people. Did I get that right? So it's a
Yeah, exactly.
tactical expression. And what comes to mind is my prior guest on the show was a gentleman by the name of Scott Waldron. And for a couple decades, he was a digital strategist and builder. So he was in the weeds, looking under the hood, building widgets, building websites. He was a technical guy. And at the same time, to some of the great points you're making, he also has tremendous personal woo.
Hmm.
He's fun to hang around. You just like Scott. He's the guy you want to have a beer with and chit chat. He would light up every room simply by being there with his personality. And he had this emotional integrity that engendered trust, calmed people down, and made people comfortable. So his personal brand has evolved almost 180 degrees from his design and developer days to the point now where he's a thought leader in internal strategic communications. And his goal is engendering trust and
Hmm.
better communication on an organizational level.
Hmm.
And when I hear you speak about how you take the good stuff that someone has and then you kind of shake, rattle, and roll it and see what comes out to meet the objectives of an evolving career, some kind of conscientious goal or change that an individual has, it could have the impact like Scott in terms of taking the good stuff, amplifying certain aspects of it. And to the great point you made about tactical recommendations, what Scott started to do was he would be up there giving keynote presentations on design and development. And people loved to listen to him and hear him and hang out with him. And then they started pointing out things in his talks that had more to do with team building, with communication, with trust. And through this almost evolutionary process, he started to prioritize those aspects of how he presented himself to completely redefine who he was professionally. He remade his personal brand almost organically along the lines of everything that you've described your process is all about.
Yeah, well, congratulations. That's a wonderful, anecdote and story. And yeah, if he didn't get any help from anybody, he seemed to know. He had an instinctive sense of how to go about become. Like you used two words that I thought was very interesting. You used the first one was his digital designer or digital strategist. What was he? What was his job?
Yeah, he would build websites and put together strategic digital plans for. I worked with him back in the day with the CDC when the CDC was putting together websites and social media outreach for educating the public about cancer and
Hmm.
disease prevention. And he was a technical guy. He was hired as a project manager and a digital strategist.
Right.
It had nothing to do with organizational development and the thought leadership that he has transformed himself into.
Yeah, well, and this is it could be a segue, but look at what he did. His title, let's say, was project manager, digital strategist, whatever it was. Look at that. That's generic. That has nothing to, there's no personality to that whatsoever. Okay. It is absolutely categorical. It doesn't differentiate in any way. And then you said he became a thought leader. Now that immediately conjures a set of behaviors, a reason to engage, a different kind of value and interest that other people will relate to. That's a great example of going from sort of a functional, a functional characteristic, I'm a gym teacher, to, something a lot larger, a lot more evocative, a lot more engaging. I'm a gym teacher. No, you are an inspiring mentor or something like that. And, it's really funny that I think now more than ever, personal branding is something that people should be, it's almost like you got to do it rather than it's a nice thing to do. Because I don't know if you agree with this, but it's become very robot like out in the world. And I know, in my industry, um, you know, I deal a lot with advertising agencies and marketing agencies and things like that. They don't have names anymore. People's names are gone. Young and Rubicam, Sachi and Sachi. And it becomes like Omnicom or, something sort of robot like. How do you escape the categorization, you know, the systemization of cogs, that are doing a job versus how you are transforming, to use your word again, the personality of what you're doing, the value of what you're providing. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in a generic pathway that really will keep you there, forever. So kudos to your last guest, because obviously it's a great case study, a great example of how to in our sort of society today, the need to absolutely go out and define yourself in a way that makes you you, and it's different than everybody else in that sort of generic, pathway.
Yeah, what you just said really resonates too in terms of commoditization. There's now this tendency to transactionalize virtually every aspect from the top to the bottom in business, in hiring, and in personal identity. Another great guest I had was a Gen Zer. She is a Zoomer. She is a person who's incredibly talented, who encountered huge roadblocks entering the workforce, a digital native. She's extremely skilled in her craft, but she found herself commoditized. She felt that she was basically just a tool of organizations who didn't really want to spend the time to onboard, who expected her to have all of these pre existing skills and got frustrated. And she redid her personal brand too. She realized that if the companies are commoditizing me, I will commoditize them. I will learn everything that I can to be as agile and as flexible as I need to be. The companies aren't going to dedicate themselves to giving me security. So I am going to play the field. I'm going to be a freelancer. And here's what's most fascinating to me within the context of this conversation. She decided to become a digital nomad.
Hmm.
So, thanks to COVID, one of the silver linings of a global pandemic is the near ubiquity of virtual work.
Hmm.
And I interviewed her while she's in Tokyo, and she's working on multiple projects. Whereas before, she felt the victim of a system where she was a generic employee. She is now Hannah, the multitasking digital nomad who has multiple skill sets across marketing, advertising, digital communications within several verticals. So it illustrates again on a different level exactly what you're saying, which is the pressure points of today's economy, today's politics, today's market has forced people to recreate themselves in a way where they can be more adaptable and more appealing to differentiate themselves from the rest and hang on to the increasingly limited opportunities that are present out there.
Absolutely. I would also add, uh, they become differentiated. In other words, I have all of these things that make people see me differently. And you know what? I'm one of a few people that can do this. I'm one of a kind, or I'm one of, I'm part of a group that is different than everybody else. So again, it goes back to what I originally said before. She wasn't managing her personal brand. Others were managing it for her by putting her in this commoditized, situation. What she did was, again, curated her personal brand in a way that broke out of that, that demonstrated more value, that fulfilled, I'm assuming, what she wanted to achieve in her life. And again, she probably is seen as one of a few rather than one of the many. Now, I think that in general, people uh, are trying to overcome that, or companies rather, are trying to overcome that in some way. Um, you know, uh, Maybe someone is seeing, the chief, the chief imagination officer. I've seen that title, or someone else. The chief, happiness director, where they're taking on titles that evoke a more well-rounded personal sort of brand, where it demonstrates, yeah, if you're in HR, yeah, I know what you do, and I don't like half of it. But if you're a chief happiness officer, or an associate happiness officer, hey, I want some of that, and how can I get it? And they may be applying certain aspects of, let's say, human resource, tools and programs and things like that. But they have, created a personal brand just using that title that immediately elevates the value, and that they can provide, and attracts a lot of people that, again, wouldn't like a commodity as someone in HR.
Yeah, 100%. And there's a mirroring effect too. You take greater pride in yourself as a chief happiness officer, kind of a Willy Wonka role,
Yeah.
than you would in some boring executive sitting there in the cube making calls and firing people.
Hmm.
So part of this branding and part of this personal branding is not only creating a flattering reflection of yourself on the part of the constituents you want to sway, but creating a flattering reflection of yourself for yourself.
Yeah.
And that could be tremendously uplifting. It's almost like this hidden yet profound benefit of the strategies and tactics that you're offering your clients to reinvent themselves through reinventing their personas, their work personality.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a great point that I didn't even think about, which is, the analogous a way that this sort of presents itself in corporate branding. The corporations have customers, and they're researching what their customers want, what their customers don't have that maybe you could fulfill. However, even more importantly, can your employees embrace that idea? Can they walk in to work that day and say, I like that strategy. I can see myself in that, giving our customers the result of that. Absolutely. It's almost like the internal, employees, in this case, in personal branding, the internal psyche, um, has to be absolutely thrilled and, motivated by their own brand, and that will create, an enthusiastic reflection in how they present themselves to other. I kind of think of you when I think of something like that. I look at you, and I listen to all the things you do and read what you write, and one of the things is you seem to have a fantastic time. And you know uh, I think that really transfers enthusiasm, and that's the way I think about it: a transfer of enthusiasm, not just, messaging or work or things like that.
Yeah, 100% on that too. If you're having a great time and you can't wait to do what you do, and you so clearly love what you do, then that enthusiasm is bound to transfer to the people on the receiving end of your energy. So, whether you're delivering good news or bad, whether you're making a prediction which astounds or terrifies, people are receptive to energy,
Hmm.
focus, energy. And it sounds to me that that's really what you're cultivating now with individuals to bring out their best, but do it in a way which is enthusiastic and exciting and motivating. And it gets them out of bed, but it also gets the recipients of their energy out of bed. And it makes everybody's life better for the interaction.
Absolutely. The if we want to take it back, we mentioned Musk before, and again, I'm not going to make any judgments about any of these people. We're really looking at them as examples of branding philosophy, good or bad. Um, I think if people listen to the Republican Party, they define their brand, their strategy really well. Like it or not, you know what they're about. And the way they talk and the way they walk, it really reinforces that and is easy to engage. Okay. You look at the Democratic Party, all right, they may have, and it's debatable whether they do or not, but they may have a good story, but one might argue they don't have speakers that have that energy to deliver it. You know, God bless. I live in New York State. God bless Chuck Schumer. A wonderful man. He was my neighbor for most of the time in Brooklyn. Um, Very nice guy, but when he steps up to speak, even if what he's saying is dead on to what people want to hear, the fact that he doesn't project, in my opinion, that energy, that passion, the fact that he's really, really not just enjoying himself, but, inspiring himself and in turn inspiring others, again, that's gonna work against his brand personality, his brand identity. So absolutely, energy, passion, enthusiasm, any of those things, qualities are definitely, worth building into your brand. And I'm not saying everyone has to be a cheerleader, but everyone has to put together a brand that people want to be around other people that are upbeat, that are positive, you know and again, I'm not talking about cheerleaders. I'm just talking about a transfer of enthusiasm. You know, I'm getting excited about this because this guy's exciting.
Is part of the challenge, and once again, we are not partisan here at all, is part of the challenge in an objective analytical sense of the Democrats and their messaging, their fragmentation. You brought up the great point that the Republicans in general, and especially these days, have maybe three, four, five key points which they're laser focused on and consistent about. The
Hmm.
Democrats, by their nature, are a coalition organization. They are a community of highly diverse constituents abounding in special interests, many of these special interests inherently contradictory to each other. So when politicians like your neighbor Schumer goes up there, this was very endemic even of Barack Obama. They're very, very careful in terms of what they say and how they say it because they're afraid to offend one of the many, 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 many special interest groups that are part of their coalition. The Republicans, in contrast, rally around only a handful of key topics, simplify them to the point of being a rallying cry in and of themselves, and are able to channel that enthusiasm, that personality, that energy completely unambiguously and with zero hindrance because they know that almost the entirety of their target audience is cheering them on.
Absolutely. I really admire, and I've always said this, that, Republicans know how to brand. And I didn't really think about it the way you put it about Democrats, but yeah, their personality is a little wobbly. The reason I say that your brand identity should have about three to five, solid traits about it is imagine a personality that has 17. It's impossible to absorb. It's impossible to digest.
And
Um,
you have no coherent
no,
message.
no.
Again, not playing sides, but a key problem with the Harris campaign was the ambiguity of a lot of messaging, which strategically created problems. But to your point, it diffused the energy as well. And I think that's an impediment. But you brought up something very, very interesting that I'd love to revisit for a second. And it's under the category of success criteria for the personal brand.
Hmm.
And by this, I mean, what we're pretty clear about the metrics of success, at least based on what you've been talking about so far. You
Hmm.
know, your personal brand is efficacious if you've accomplished your goals that you've set out to do for this brand transformation. That's
Hmm.
number one. You know, your personal brand exercise is a success if you have made an impact on your target audience in a way that you have got them to do what you set out for them to do. It's about ultimately what we do in marketing and advertising, behavioral modification in
Hmm.
alignment with your goals. And you know that your personal branding exercise has been successful if the deconstruction and reconstruction of that brand persona resonates in a way that can translate into effective tactical implementation downstream along the lines of you were mentioning, whether you wear new shoes or whether you become a thought leader, what have you, whether you become a digital nomad,
Hmm.
doesn't matter. There's a seamless transition between goals, audience, personality creation, if you will, and tactical execution. All right, that if I hope I got that right, but it sounds to me like that's how you're setting this up. Now,
Absolutely. Yeah, you're working within an ecosystem, so to speak.
right, and they're all
Yeah.
dependent on each other.
Right.
So
Right.
so given all of that, you mentioned that you feel that Musk has fallen off the personal branding gravy train. And once again, for our listeners, I want this conversation, and I'm sure you do too, to be utterly devoid of value judgments based on partisan politics. We're not talking about the policies or the personality in a way that is air quote political. We're really trying to get at, you and I, what constitutes an efficacious personal brand. Your opinion is, if I heard you correctly, that Elon Musk is not doing that now. And the reason it raised my curiosity is I feel exactly the opposite. So, if we take this apart for a couple minutes, I think it would be very evocative and illustrate in a very, very precise way some of your points.
Well,
So,
challenge accepted.
excellent. So let's roll our sleeves up. And once again, I do want to emphasize that this is not a partisan exercise. This is
No,
not a
no, not at all.
political
Not at all.
conversation. This is a conversation, and I want to repeat about the efficacy of a personal brand. And in this sense, it's transformative because,
Hmm.
as we all know, Elon was a Democrat who was concerned about global climate change and basically hung his hat on the left or liberal side of the political spectrum.
Hmm.
And as we all know, as we see in our nanosecond to nanosecond news flashes on our phone, he has become quite the opposite. That said, however, my personal opinion is that he is knocking his personal brand out of the park
Hmm.
like no one has. And you feel the opposite. So please indulge me and the listeners.
Well, so are you including everything that Musk has done in the past and is doing now, or just what he's done in the past?
I'm just saying that this guy right now has an absolutely astonishing, unbelievably successful personal brand.
Yeah, yeah.
That's it. That's all I really care about. We could slice and dice what he did and didn't do, and we can slice and dice the efficacy of his prior brand personality, but what I'm getting at here is yes or no, and I think your answer is no. Does or does not Elon Musk have the embodiment of the ultimate personal brand?
Yeah, it's funny. You gave me sort of a dichotomy there, and I'm not sure it's either or, yes or no. And I know that frustrates you. Um, Let me answer it this way. Um, Without a doubt, the reason we're even talking about Musk is because of the monumental brand that he's achieved in the marketplace, or rather in the world, whether you like him or not, it's almost devoid of that. And I would even say, whether he's left of center or right of center in his beliefs. Um, a couple things. One is, I would say that part of his personal brand is innovation, okay, and entrepreneurship. So people associate, in my opinion, and I'm going to ask you if you agree with me there. um, Innovation, the first thing I think people say is, wow, this guy really brought, the electric car, and made it and institutionalized it, instead of it just being, you know, a, a an out, basically a fanciful idea. He really elevated it to, primary status. That's very innovative. Okay. SpaceX, or the satellite network, Space Link, I think it is, or whatever.
Starlink.
Starlink. Those things are not just innovative; they are incredibly entrepreneurial. All right, so absolutely, what an amazing brand that he's created. My point. Well, first of all, would you agree those two traits are part of his brand?
1000%.
Okay. Okay. So let's take that. And by the way, those two traits are two among probably many that he has. He's not that simple. Um, he's much more complex. Take a look at what he's doing now. He's the head of Doge. And right now, he's got a very entrepreneurial approach to, do his job right now of reducing the size of the federal government to run more efficiently. That to me is basically what I think his charge is right now. So
Can I stop you for 1 second because I think it'll add clarity to the conversation?
sure thing.
His charge on the surface is to optimize efficiency,
Right.
but his modus operandi is as an innovator and as an entrepreneur. And what I specifically mean is he is applying the exact same methodology to the federal bureaucracy as he has applied to Tesla, SpaceX, and all of his endeavors. So when we're looking at Musk, we don't look at him through the lens necessarily of someone who is doing this thing, but we're looking at, to the analog we had before, we're looking at Tony Stark coming in and revolutionizing government. Now, whether you agree with that or not, that is the personality or the persona that I believe he is embodying to his target audience.
Okay. So and thank you for that. Very, as always, not just interesting, but well backed up, by your rationale. And again, there's no right answer necessarily. The answer is perception, right? Um, the way I see it is Tesla, uh, you know, uh, Starlink, SpaceX, those are things, okay? Those are not feeling, breathing, living things. they're objects. What he's doing now is the government is not an object, so to speak. It represents people. Okay? People are not objects. They are living, breathing creatures with feelings, with families, with livelihoods. Okay? And what he's doing right now is applying the same aspects of creating or implementing his brand, but in a completely different way. Okay? So, for instance, the way I see it is uh, you're saying it's innovative. I'm saying it's reckless. And the reason that I make that distinction is because if he were to go through and systematically, scientifically go through each part, each division of the federal government, like he does when he's creating a technology, that would be a great extension of innovation and entrepreneurship. I would say that number one, he's being indiscriminate and not systematic about it. He is cutting randomly, in my opinion. And, with that in mind, that is something that's not on brand with being innovative. Uh, it's entrepreneurial, but I consider it to be sort of reckless and thoughtless. And again, I'm not judging him. Um, but the idea is it doesn't accrue to the brand he's developed all along. This is a new trait that he's overlaying with those that is beginning to almost decay what he's created in certain people's minds. So, that to me is my rationale for disagreeing with you. Let me turn it back over to you.
Yeah, I think it's the opposite of decay and it's a quantum leap evolution. And let me be as specific as possible. Let's zero in on your qualification and description and differentiation of the federal bureaucracy from an organization like Tesla or SpaceX. An organization like these companies is consisted of employees. There are people, human beings in offices doing things. The things that they do in those offices is ostensibly to revolutionize the automobile industry and then revolutionize space. How did Musk go about revolutionizing these industries with that kind of paradigm shift? He employed the exact same approach. He's been blamed of being reckless. He's been blamed to overpromise and underdeliver. He has been blamed as being brutal and inhuman. He has fired people. He has been ad hoc and arbitrary in many of his decisions. He has exemplified some of the less nice characteristics of human beings, and especially leadership and management, in terms of really a hypocrisy around, let's say, everyone should speak freely, and if you say one word, you're fired. So we can go through the long list of Elon's more negative attributes when you look at it ethically. But the mechanism of transformation that he brought to automobiles and space is absolutely identical to what he's doing with the federal government. And now you're saying that there's a qualitative difference between cars and rockets and a federal bureaucracy. But I disagree there too, at least in principle, in the sense that the federal bureaucracy has a function. And their function, ostensibly, is to keep our infrastructure going, protect our country from people abroad. Although the bureaucracy per se doesn't really do that, except for maybe the Pentagon, right? So, what I'm getting at is there is a shift in how you model Musk's efforts between private industry and the government, which many, many people don't see. Because again, in principle, the government is here to perform a task, to do something. Tesla's cars are designed to get people from here to there. Starlink is designed to connect the world with internet and communications. And SpaceX is designed, to his point, to ultimately get humans on Mars and reignite the space program. And these organizations, indeed, are made up of people, many tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people. He has been mean. He has been brutal. And he has been, ellipsis, successful. And this is why I don't see any disconnect between what he has been doing and what he is doing. And if nothing else, I see a radical transformation in terms of how many Americans view this very issue, specifically the role of the federal government and the impact that someone like Musk could or should be having. Does that make sense? So
Yeah, no, I can.
I hear what you're saying about the apparent qualitative difference between government and business, but if you really shake it out, it's really just people doing stuff, right? And the stuff that they do at private companies is very similar to the stuff they do at the government, only we, over the course of many decades, have assigned some differences that the American people, many of them are saying aren't valid. And then we brought in this anarchist, this wrecker, this technologist to shake things to their very core. A lot of people are upset, but we go back to this idea of a brand and a personal brand. And
Hmm.
here's, I think, where you and I differ. I think Musk's personal brand has not changed an iota.
Hmm.
It's just been accelerated and expanded like nothing we've ever seen before.
So I can definitely see your point. You articulate it really well, um, and there's no right and wrong here, except in the minds of people. So, two words I want to speak about in what you just said. One is he's been successful. I would argue it's way too early to know if what he's doing is a success. We might end the country, the federal government might end up crippled. We don't know yet. It's way too early to know if, in fact, it is a success. So that's one thing. The second thing is you use the word designed. He designed Tesla, he designed these cars. To me, design implies a very strategic, if not scientific, examination of resources, situations, human need, and designing things that basically address what needs to be addressed in terms of technical problems, human satisfaction, etc. I don't think this is designed. I think this is hacked at. If he had gone through and basically said, I want to cut 4 trillion out of federal government or whatever the figure he quotes, instead of going out and saying this department, all right, if I cut this department by X%, I can get 1 trillion out of it. Okay, so let me start there. What he's done instead is cut every department without doing that systematic scientific design. All right, give you an example. um, Take the parks department. Okay, uh, he nationwide, he reduced the parks department employees by 1,000. Okay, um, now I would argue you let one park department go. So he's done this 1,000 times. The average salary of the people, again, that he fired or dismissed or whatever, called for the reduction of, make less than $50,000. So basically, he took $500,000 out of that department. That's a drop in the ocean for the 4 trillion he wants to create. So my argument is he's not scientifically designing anything. He's basically just running roughshod over the whole aspect as if they're not interconnected, as if they contribute to the 4 trillion, and I think it's haphazard. So I think that quality isn't matched by the rigor, the systemization, the design that he's demonstrated in spades with his other innovations.
These are terrific points, and this is a robust conversation, and I'm loving this. My pushback to your pushback is the difference between perception and reality. Whether or not Tesla, Starlink, SpaceX did or didn't do this or that, there's a general perception that he has revolutionized not only two industries, but e commerce as well with his first PayPal salvo. And whether or not Elon can be attributed to all these successes and how hands on he is depends on who you listen to, and it goes on and on. I have found people on either side of the Elon spectrum. There are those who hate him and think that he's a complete fraud and has done nothing. And there are those who think that he's a transcendent genius and this is all worked out. And there are very few people in between. He's a very polarizing figure. But once again, it's perception and reality. So when you say that the results of the dirge of the federal bureaucracy have not become evident yet, except for a lot of people suffering, including a lot of foreign people suffering with the USAID plug pulled as well, it looks bad. But at the same time, there is the perception, I would argue, that he is going in full steam, that he is analyzing the hell out of everything, and that he's making sweeping cuts that are based on not only his modus operandi and his brand personality, but the modus operandi and brand personality of, another ellipsis, the boss, Donald Trump. And there is another illustration of, regardless which side you sit yourself on, an amazing brand personality, right? Or amazing personal brand, one that's clearly defined, at the center of everyone's attention. And then when you take the Venn diagram of the Elon Musk personal brand and you superimpose it with the circle of the Donald J. Trump personal brand, what is that shady little spot in the middle of those two circles? It is what you're seeing from the Park Service. It is what you're seeing in terms of exactly as you laid out this sense of haphazard, cruel reduction. And it's designed to, lastly, to my point, fulfill the goals of the exercise to the target audience that's been prescribed with the mechanism that's been constructed using the tactics that are being self evident. So, whether we like it or not, and whether perception matches reality or not, I find the Elon Musk and Donald Trump personal brands to be the most defining and powerful and effective personal brands of our era. And if you support them politically, you are cheering from the sidelines. And if you are cowering in the corner, fearing for democracy, then you either way you have to admit that there's an incredible power here and effectiveness of conception and execution, and that's kind of what I'm getting at, which is you seem to not think so, but I'm taking almost a Nietzschean approach, which is it's beyond good and evil. If you have a personal brand, the criteria for its efficacy is those four steps that you laid out. Does it meet your goals? Is it satisfying your audience? Is the process effective? And is the tactical execution making an impact so that everyone keeps talking about you? Yes, 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 and yes. And my last point is whether you buy my my spiel here or not, is there a moral component to a personal brand? I mean, I hate to use the Hitler thing again, by the same criteria, he had a powerful personal brand too. And I'm not for a second equating Hitler with all this stuff, but I'm going to an extreme example of someone devoid of what we would consider a moral foundation, yet was able to accomplish the goals of creating a powerful personal brand. Is there an ethical foundation to this that you translate into the great work that you do? So I'm inviting you to push back.
And you know I will. But actually, let me focus on the things that we agree on. I tried to stipulate at the beginning of this. I agree with you. You know, one of the most monumental, effective brands. You know, Musk. I never disagree with you about that. So we agree about that. I also agree with you about perception is reality, and we use the word polarizing. We both agree on that. I would say that's a component of his personal brand. He's polarizing, and whether that's good or not, that's certainly there as a trait. And I think people see it that way based on, like you said, they either like him or hate him. There's very little in between. Now, the let me just say a word before I go to the Hitler thing. Um,
And just listeners, we are not equating Donald Trump, Elon Musk with Adolf Hitler. I use that. I just want to qualify it because the Hitler reaction formation is tired. I'm using this as an example of the most extreme case of a personal brand that just about everyone on the planet would consider abhorrent. So I just wanted to point that out.
and thank you for doing that, because again, we're talking about branding, personal branding, and not politics. So back to perception and reality. Uh, what Someone responded to a post I did and said part of his brand is he doesn't give a damn about what anyone thinks. Now, I don't disagree with that, okay? And I'm not going to make a judgment whether or not that's a admirable or a terrible trait, but not giving a damn about what people think, well, that illustrates a very good principle of personal branding. If you have 1,000 people in your audience, is a metaphor. If you have 1,000 people in the audience and you are performing on stage and delivering your act, okay, and 400 of those people, okay, are clapping, and 600 of those people are booing, you go where the love is. All right. You actually say, I'm not going to please everybody, like your point about the Democratic brand before. You can't please everybody. You have developed 400, or 40% of followers and of people who like your personal brand. That's good, right? That's very robust. So go where the love is. Go where your brand is really making a significant impact, and ignore the others. There's no real reason to have your brand please everybody. It'll be more focused and it'll be more effective. So we agree with that as well. Now, the Hitler thing, absolutely. His brand to me, well, I was going to say to everybody, but that's not true. uh, to me, and I think to most people in the Western world, he also has one of the most iconic, recognizable brands in all of history. Okay. Two things about that. I'm going to leave the morality thing as my second point. The first point is that brand led to his downfall. The success aspect, we talked about with is what Musk's doing now successful or not? It ultimately destroyed him. So the 600 people applauding, booing, overshadowed the 400 people applauding. Again, the a different perception became reality. We don't want a world with him in it necessarily. Now, the moral aspect of this, and it's a fascinating aspect. Um, I would say, and again, this is debatable. I would say it's very, very, very important, And the reason is that a personal brand that uh, basically a group of people think is admirable, is worth engaging with, is worth following, um, it destroys and hurts and really um, purges the society of feeling, thinking people, etc. That is a trait, that is an aspect of one's personal brand that I don't think will result in a success ultimately. All right. And Hitler's one example of that. I'm trying to think of other examples of that, but let's stick on this one. I'll turn it back to you to reply to what I'm saying.
Well, let's look back at your friend's comment about Elon Musk, how quote unquote, he doesn't care what people think.
Mhm.
Now, instead of looking at that as a criteria or a mechanism of brand differentiation or effectiveness, what is he saying about Musk? And is that in alignment with the personal brand attributes that Musk has strived to engender? So when your buddy says, quote unquote, this guy doesn't care what people think, what does that translate into emotionally? And what that translate into, drum roll please, he's innovative. He's an entrepreneur. Because what's the number one quality of someone who's innovative emotionally? They're fearless. They're creative. By definition, if you're an innovator, then you're shaking stuff up. You're not doing what everyone else has done to get pretty much the same results, but you're taking astonishing risks. You're breaking the mold. You're creating a new paradigm based on not caring what other people think. So I think it's bang on point. And vis-a-vis the other stuff, I don't think it's fair to really look at the medium or especially long-term outcome of this kind of exercise if you are engendering incredible results through the trajectory of your personal brand transformation. So Hitler died in a bunker. That sucked, but he changed world history. And you could argue for the better or for the worse, but he changed world history. Musk has already transformed 3 industries, and now he's going to add one more to his trifecta, which is transforming the government. Now, if you listen to what he said in the Oval Office with his 4-year-old crawling all over the place, he basically gave the rationale for doing what he's doing, which is the potentially existential dilemma of the United States defaulting on its debt. His statement was categorically true that we are spending as much, if not more, on the interest to the debt than we are on national defense. And that number currently, I believe, is between $850 and $900 billion a year. So if you look at it through that lens, you're not concerned about the Park Service and excesses of an overzealous cost cutter, but you're looking at potentially saving the country from going broke. And if you look at it through the lens, you transform an innovator and an entrepreneur into a national hero. And that's what's going on here. And that's why I find it intriguing. So, once again, I'm agreeing with you in principle, and in execution, I also agree that it seems ad hoc and sloppy, and it's clearly politically motivated. But once again, I brought up the Venn diagram with the other circle, which is Trump and his personal brand, which has a very, very different kind of agenda than just saving money. So you see what I'm getting at here, which is I think that your observations about Musk are loaded with value judgments that, frankly, a big chunk of the American public would disagree with you about. And the reason I think this is interesting and relevant to our conversation that ostensibly has nothing to do with politics or the economy or the country is I'm trying to get at the heart of what a good personal brand is about. And I'm also curious as to how we measure it. And here I will completely agree with you, just as a capper, and I'm eager to pass the mic back to you. But as you mentioned, I'm my personal brand is a very happy and joyful one. I love ranting on TikTok. I love writing blog posts. I'm about to publish my second novel, which is a fun science fiction one, hopefully this week. And I wake up in the morning and I can't wait to do all these things. In the kitchen, I rant. In my office, I write. And I am a communicator at heart, and I take immense personal satisfaction and joy in just being able to share ideas and to, as I say, bloviate. And it's a joyful, wonderful experience. So, that said, I think I'm getting to the heart of what you're getting at, which is a personal brand is awesome if, and this might be a value judgment, but here I'm agreeing with you, brings joy to the world, right? Shares not just enthusiasm, but has the vector component of doing good, making people feel good. When has a brand launched that just makes people feel shitty? Right?
Mm.
Remember the subliminal advertising of the cigarette companies, like they put the word cancer in in a picture to get people to they're unconscious to want to kill themselves. I mean, is that good marketing? Is that a good brand? Right? It's don't we want to create a flattering reflection of ourselves in the personal brands that we create? And with that, I'll toss it back to you, which is I see where you're going, and I wish everything you say is true. And my concern, if you will, is that, in a Nietzschean sense, a personal brand is beyond good and evil. And can't we all just get along and concentrate on the good stuff? So, with that, it's all yours, buddy.
Well, I wouldn't have let you cut everything off if I couldn't respond to what you said. Um, like I said, in principle, we agree about a lot in principle. Um, you mentioned, hey, you're making a lot of value judgments. This is one of the biggest points I'm going to make. Branding is about value judgment. That's what it's for. You're basically trying to create values that people feel positive about, like you said, judging you to be someone who's a positive force that they see, a reflection of themselves, and a brand they want to join. Okay? Value judgments are inherent in the whole discipline. So you can't have branding without value judgments. That's the idea. You're trying to create a series of values that people judge positively. The people you want to judge positively. So that's a big point that I'm making. That is not a criticism. Uh, what I consider is what you said to me is not a criticism. It's a validation of exactly what branding, personal branding, or branding in general is about. And if that's the case, then uh, judgments about the moral aspects of it are real. They're very real, whether or not the government goes broke or not. That's a sacrifice. And again, you're right. Perception is reality. And right now, um, the perception is overall based on an election, right? That, hey, we want to join this brand. We like innovation. We like entrepreneurship. We like efficiency, right? Um, I'm just wondering again what I said before, and uh, which I hope you agree with is it's too early to define success here. Um, we don't know whether or not these cuts will end up destroying what they're trying to create, or as you're seeing it, most likely achieving their objective.
Well,
So
I would, in fairness, though, I would like to divorce the outcome from the intent, because you could always move the goalposts, right?
this
Because
is this is
by
your word. You said successful, and drum roll, he's successful. You said that.
no, but he's successful in perception. So
Oh,
he has,
oh, oh.
see, I'm not saying in an objective, measurable format that X dollars have been saved. I mean successful in terms of accomplishing the goals of creating a personal brand.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you
No,
then.
no, that's okay. But I want to take, any kind of material success out of it, because as I'm saying, the goalposts can be moved, because by any stretch of the imagination, he's the wealthiest person on the planet. He has an office in the White House, and his will is the way. So that seems successful. Will it accomplish ostensibly the goals of cost reduction and reducing the deficit so the country doesn't go broke? Question mark. But that's not really part of this conversation, because I think, to reinforce what you're saying, we're really talking about values, and we're talking about doing things in a way where instead of just focusing on those material goals, if I hear you clearly, and this is what I'm getting at, and I'm so glad we're getting there, that it's not just about the air quote success, that it's not just about cutting money, it's not just about the bottom line of the spreadsheet. What you were intimating, and what I agree with categorically, is that branding, if it does have meaning, as I was mentioning before, makes life better, improves the quality of life for people, and puts values where they should be in terms of their prioritization. So here's a counterexample. Everyone's talking about Musk as the icon, the titan of industry, but look at another personal brand that's on the opposite end of the spectrum as Musk, who has, by these success criteria, done just as well. Satya Nadella from Microsoft is the anti Musk. He is deliberative. He is kind. He knows something like, this is no exaggeration, 15,000 Microsoft employees by name. He walks the halls. Everyone high fives Satya. He had to fire tens of thousands of people when he first started to unload Nokia. But so he can do the cuts. He can be the tough CEO, just like Elon. But everyone likes Satya, and he's cunning, and he's clever, and he can be cutthroat too. But he is the exact opposite in terms of the personal brand characteristics of what ostensibly constitutes a brilliant, successful mover and shaker. And now you can say Satya hasn't done what Elon did, but Satya is by any stretch the probably the greatest CEO for a turnaround situation in American, if not worldwide, business history. Another example is Bill Gates. If we're just laying them out here,
That's where I
Bill
thought.
Gates.
That's where I thought you were going to go at
Well,
first.
I was laddering up. So Bill Gates is soft spoken, and Bill Gates has made a name for himself not firing people and being a troll on his own social media platform and lying out of his teeth and doing all these things, right?
Mm.
Bill Gates has made a name for himself post Microsoft by eliminating malaria, literally saving 1 million babies a year, building toilets, trying to make the planet a better, nicer place, and doing it in a way that's as efficient as possible. Bill Gates is bringing Doge to suffering, right? So here in ways, regardless of your politics now, and again, I just keep want to qualify that, because I'm really trying to get at what works best for a brand ultimately in marketing, communications, advertising, And I think our boats, although we were kind of looking at each other over the horizon, I think we're now running flush with each other, right? With the sun setting, at least on this conversation, that we're agreeing that a personal brand is value driven. Check.
Absolutely.
And these values really shouldn't be about the thing. And by the thing, I mean is like, you're going to shoot a rocket, you're going to cut the budget, you're going to do that thing. Personal brand should make your life and everyone else's life better. And that might sound Pollyanna and naive, and of course you need to be a commando and you need to cut the steak to eat it and there will be blood. But if we're talking about personal branding, and if you have the whole armamentarium of everything that Vince offers you, then pick and choose the attributes and do the things which will make your life and everyone else's life a little bit more brighter instead of shitty. Is that a good way to kind of put a bow on this idea of personal brand?
We're ending this on agreement on Concord. Success is how they built their personal brands. Musk and the other examples that you brought up, they're all excellent examples of personal branding, independent of moral judgment. So we are actually on the same page regarding that.
Shocking, shocking. We're gonna have to get back on in 6 months and find things to argue about. But this has been a lovely conversation. Once
Always.
again, folks, Vince Perry is president of Parry Branding, a name that was chosen completely at random, obviously. He's been in the business for decades. He has been the chief branding officer of big Madison Avenue agencies. He has run organizations, and he is now and has been for a while specializing in personal branding. So we will leave links within the description for Vince's contact info. I'm sure there are a bunch of case studies you want to share and maybe other resources that people can be pointed to. So I'll be sure and include these in the description of the podcast. And thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. This has been a blast, as always.
Terrific, terrific. And as I'm mentioning, let's see you again in 6 months. And then, maybe we could put some qualifiers on the Elon Musk personality. And meanwhile, Bill Gates will keep being Bill Gates and more children will be saved. And Satya Nadella will sink his teeth even further and further into AI while being that nice guy who high fives you by the water cooler. So there you go.
Well, in 6 months, I just want to let you know, FanDuel is giving me 3 to 5 odds.
All right. We're gonna double down on that. Take care, Vince. Thank you.
Thank you, Mookie.
Yeah.